Protestors, ICE, and the importance of truth in these days. Truth in tumultuous times. Christians are alive in tumultuous and confusing times. One of the enduring marks of every season of tumult is the presence of disagreements about truth. When you pay attention to almost any debated matter these days, you will discover that most every problem is not only defined by disagreements over how to analyze and solve problems, but also by basic disagreements about the facts of those problems. An excellent contemporary example of this is the story that has dominated the domestic headlines for most of January. It's the tragic story of a woman in Minneapolis shot and killed in her car by an agent of Immigration and Customs Enforcement on January 7th. Everyone can agree that the event happened and that any loss of life is always tragic. But after that, the agreement stops and wild disparities rage about the most basic facts of the event. Officials from the Trump administration claim the deceased woman was shot by the agent in a just use of deadly force after she weaponized her car against him and was attempting to run him down. Democratic officials have claimed the Trump administration is lying and that the driver was murdered by the ICE agent. On the one hand, such diametrically opposed accounts are maddening. It's very frustrating when elected officials and news outlets provide false reports that cloud the facts. On the other hand, such behavior is typical of all times of tumult and strife. Any time any society is going through a significant season of change and unrest, the nature of truth gets debated. Faithful Christians in these days must be defined by a passion for the truth. We need to be people who tell the truth, who expose lies, and who know how to distinguish truths from lies when listening to the reports of others. In days of dishonesty, Christians can start to distinguish truth from lies by knowing what the truth is not. What the truth is not. In these dishonest days, influencers on social media, reporters on cable news, hosts of popular podcasts, protesters in the street, government officials, and even our own families try to pass off lies as truth. Sometimes they do this on purpose, and other times they do it because they've been deceived themselves. Living in this world means learning to recognize at least three realities that clarify what the truth is not. Truth is not whatever you want it to be. Your desires don't make something true. Too many people are tempted to believe truth is established by what they desire. You can see this very clearly with the shooting in Minneapolis. If you want ICE to arrest and deport illegal immigrants, you are likely to be the kind of person who agrees that the agent's actions were justified. But if you do not want illegal immigrants arrested and deported, you're likely the kind of person who thinks the ICE officer is guilty of a crime. Whether the issue is ICE agents and protesters or a disagreement in your family kitchen, Christians must admit that our desires are not the arbiter of truth. We must learn that the pursuit of truth has nothing to do with the discovery of our personal desires, but with an embrace of objective facts. Truth is not what you most fear. Sometimes we believe information not because we want it to be true, but because we don't want it to be true. This is the opposite of what I just discussed. Our worst fears never make something true, and a spirit of pessimism cannot be admitted into evidence to establish the facts of a case. You may be one of millions that are fearful that illegal immigrants will overrun our country unless they are apprehended and deported by federal agents. Or you may be one of other millions that are fearful that the tragic shooting in Minneapolis is the first of many deaths to come if law enforcement officials are not reined in. Regardless of the side you are on, the presence of your fears is not enough to establish a fact. Christians must never allow our fears to deter us from an embrace of the truth. Truth is not who you love. Sometimes we believe information not because we know it's true, not because of what we want to be true, or even because of what we fear, but because we love the source of information that shared it with us. With the tragedy in Minneapolis, the vast majority of people who listened exclusively to officials from the Trump administration or who heard about the shooting on Fox News will believe that the ICE agent engaged in a defensible use of force. It is similarly obvious that people who listen to the Democratic governor of Minnesota, the Democratic mayor of Minneapolis, and who get their news about it from MSNBC will believe the ICE agent to be guilty of murder. Unfortunately, increasing numbers of news sources are seeking to drive up views, hits, likes, shares, and votes by telling their audience what they think they want to hear instead of reporting straight facts. This is a dangerous trend that underscores how cautious we must be before assuming we have all the facts after receiving information from only one source. We cannot construct an understanding of the truth built on our desires, our fears, or our loyalties. Instead, we must establish truth on biblical grounds. The biblical nature of truth. The truth must be defined by what is. Something is true when it conforms to reality. We tell the truth when we make statements that reflect the reality of a situation, and we tell lies when we make statements intentionally at odds with reality. In the Bible, reality is established by warrant. That is, we believe a statement reflects reality when there is evidence for it. One of the most consistent forms of biblical warrant is eyewitness testimony. 2 Corinthians 13:1 says, "Every charge must be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses." This biblical standard is repeated throughout Scripture in places like Deuteronomy 19:15, Numbers 35:30, Matthew 18:16, 1 Timothy 5:19, and Hebrews 10:28. The evidence of 2 or 3 people establishes the biblical standard of credible eyewitness testimony. The importance of the credibility of eyewitness testimony is crucial since corrupt people can conspire to lie, as they did in the trial and execution of Jesus Christ. See Matthew 26:60-61. What happened in Minneapolis? The Bible demands that we evaluate facts in order to understand what happened in Minneapolis. The Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, announced on January 18th that the actions of the ICE agent who shot the protester were under review. Because Christians care about the facts, we'll want to leave room for any information from that investigation that may alter our conclusions. Having said that, enough facts are available right now to begin to establish reality. A just authority and a just cause. First, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement is a legitimate law enforcement entity in the administration of President Donald Trump, who was duly elected to his office in 2024 by the American people. Those ICE agents are enforcing federal rules passed by the United States Congress and signed into law by the President of the United States. That is the very definition of legal. These facts mean ICE is a legitimate authority engaged in a just cause, a justifiable use of force. Second, multiple videos of the shooting in Minneapolis detail events in the lead-up to and the aftermath of the shooting. It's abundantly clear from multiple angles that the victim of the shooting was engaged in taunting federal officers and refusing their lawful instructions, and in accelerating her car and slamming it into the agent who ultimately shot her. I have checked with several Christians and federal law enforcement who have told me that everything the ICE agent did is well within the normal rules of engagement for the use of lethal force. He had every reason to fear his life was in danger and was fully justified in defending his life and the life of others. A biblical use of force. Finally, the Apostle Paul talks about the importance of submitting to the government in Romans 13, verse 4, when he says, "He is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger, who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer." The Bible makes clear that God establishes governmental power to be an object of wrath for those who do wrong. God allows agents of the government to bear the sword, that is, to use force, as they serve the public good. A response controlled by reality. All the available information gives every indication that the use of force on the part of the ICE agent in Minneapolis, while tragic, was indeed justified. Regardless of what you want, what you fear, your political affiliation, or where you get your news, these facts must control our response. When the facts control our response, it will lead to wisdom. You should never impede law enforcement in the lawful fulfillment of their work. You should never resist the lawful instructions of law enforcement. You should never engage in aggressive uses of force against law enforcement. To do otherwise is lethally foolish. Any American has the right to disagree with the authorities, to register that disagreement in peaceful ways, to try and persuade the government of your position, or to elect a new administration at the next election. But for too many in Minneapolis, the facts are not controlling their response. Obvious facts are being displaced by fear, hatred, and politics. Instead of wisdom, we're seeing escalating foolishness. Protests are expanding. On Sunday, a mob infiltrated a service of Christian worship, and the Trump administration is now considering deploying the National Guard to deter more violence. This is all going in a bad and very dangerous direction that will only see the increase of violence and death. That will be to the great misfortune not only of the people of Minnesota, but to our entire society. The heated situation in Minneapolis is at the crossroads of any number of conflicts related to immigration policy, the leadership of President Trump, the best way to protest, justifiable uses of force, the role Christians should play in our society, and many other realities. But we will not make progress on any of those matters if we can't agree on the nature of truth itself. In John 14:6, Jesus identifies himself as the very embodiment of truth. We need to ask him to give us his grace and his truth in these days.